She lived a life most people never noticed. Every morning she woke before the sun, washed her face with cold water, and prepared herself for another long day. Her room was small, with plain walls and old furniture, but it was clean. She believed that even if life was hard, dignity should never be lost. She dressed simply, choosing the same worn shoes and modest clothes she had owned for years. There was nothing about her that demanded attention. And that was exactly how the world treated her. She moved through the city quietly, taking the same bus each day. Sitting by the window watching people rush past, some carried confidence, others carried stress, but no one carried her story. To strangers, she looked ordinary, maybe even invisible. People rarely made eye contact with her. When they did, it was often brief, followed by a look of judgment or disinterest. She had grown used to it. Over time, silence had become her armor. Her job was simple and tiring. She worked long hours doing tasks that others avoided. She never complained. When spoken to, she answered politely. When ignored, she continued working. Many assumed she had no ambition, no dreams beyond survival. What they didn't know was that she observed everything. She listened more than she spoke. She noticed emotions, tones, and unspoken words. Life had taught her to be aware. That day began like any other, but something felt different in the air. The city seemed louder, filled with excitement and anticipation. Posters hung on walls announcing a small public event inside a grand building downtown. It was a place known for elegance and talent, a space where music was celebrated and respected. She had passed that building many times but never entered. It felt like a world far from hers. She stopped walking and looked at the entrance. People were dressed well, laughing, speaking with confidence. Some carried instruments, others wore expressions that suggested pride. She stood there for a moment, unsure why her feet had slowed. A quiet pull settled in her chest, one she hadn't felt in a long time. She told herself it was nothing, just curiosity. Still, she didn't turn away. Inside, the building was bright and warm. The air carried the faint smell of polished wood and old memories. Music echoed softly from somewhere deep within. Her steps felt heavier as she entered, aware of how out of place she looked. Conversations paused briefly. Eyes moved toward her, then away. Some whispered. Others smiled in a way that wasn't kind. She lowered her gaze and continued forward, reminding herself she had every right to be there. No sign said she wasn't welcome. Yet the looks told a different story. People judged her before she spoke a word. They saw her clothes, her posture, her quiet nature, and decided she had nothing to offer. She took a seat near the back, hoping to disappear into the shadows. Around her, people spoke excitedly about music, skill, and talent. They discussed performances, training, and recognition. Their words carried confidence and pride. She listened, hands folded in her lap, heart steady but alert. The sound of a piano being tested reached her ears, and something inside her stirred. Her fingers twitched slightly as if remembering something familiar. She pressed them together, grounding herself. Memories threatened to rise, but she pushed them back. This was not the time. She was just an observer, it's like always. Someone near her laughed softly and leaned toward another person, whispering while glancing in her direction. She didn't need to hear the words to understand the meaning. She had seen that look her whole life. It was the look that said she didn't belong. The look that said she was small. She breathed slowly, refusing to let it affect her. Years of quiet endurance had taught her control. Still, a small ache formed in her chest. Not anger, not sadness, but something deeper. A longing. A memory of who she once was before life demanded survival above all else. As more people entered, the room grew full. The excitement increased. The piano at the front sat silently, polished and proud. Lights reflected off its surface. To many, it was just an instrument. To her, it was something more. It represented a voice she had not used in a long time. She remembered a younger version of herself, sitting on a broken bench, practicing quietly so no one would complain. She remembered learning through listening, through repetition, through determination. Those memories stayed locked away, shared with no one. Life had forced her to choose practicality over passion. Dreams had been packed away carefully, never thrown out, just hidden. A staff member walked across the stage, adjusting chairs and checking notes. The event was about to begin. People leaned forward, eager. Some spoke about proving themselves, others about being discovered. Confidence filled the room, but humility was rare. She stayed still, her presence unnoticed except by those who judged. One person whispered louder than necessary, questioning why someone like her would attend such a place. A few chuckled. She heard it. Pretending not to notice had become second nature. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Still, she did not leave. Something inside her refused to move. Not stubbornness, not pride, but a quiet strength built over years of being underestimated. She told herself she was only there to listen. Nothing more. But her heart beat a little faster each time her eyes drifted toward the piano. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start. A hush fell over the room. Anticipation thickened the air. She sat upright, hands resting calmly, face composed. Anyone watching closely might have noticed the focus in her eyes. The depth that didn't match the assumptions made about her. She had learned long ago that life rarely gave second chances. When it did, they arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. You either recognized them, or you didn't. As the first speaker approached the stage, she leaned back slightly, listening. The words washed over her, but her attention drifted inward. Thoughts stirred. Memories warmed. Fear whispered. Doubt followed. She pushed them aside, choosing calm instead. Around her, people smiled confidently, certain of their place in the world. They believed talent announced itself loudly, dressed well, and demanded attention. They had never learned that some of the strongest things grow in silence. She didn't know yet what would happen next. She didn't plan anything. All she knew was that she was exactly where she needed to be, even if no one else believed it. The room waited. And so did she. She remembered the nights when the world outside was dark and silent. The little apartment she lived in had thin walls that let every sound in and out. Outside, the city never truly slept. Car horns, footsteps, voices carried through the night. Inside, she practiced quietly, fingers brushing against the old keys of a piano she had managed to keep in one corner of the room. The piano was worn, some keys chipped, some sticking, but it had a voice she knew intimately. She had been drawn to music long, for life had forced her into routines and responsibilities. As a child, she had watched performers on small stages, streets, and on television, captivated by the way music could speak without words. Her parents had no money for lessons, no patience for what they thought was a foolish dream. Yet she had found ways. She learned by listening to recordings, repeating notes until her fingers remembered what her ears heard. Life was never simple. She worked during the day to support herself and her family. She cooked, cleaned, and carried burdens that were heavy for her age. Every evening, she would return to her room and, despite exhaustion, sit at the piano. The music became a refuge, a place where nothing else mattered. There she was not judged by clothes, by appearance, by her quiet nature. There she was only herself. She remembered the nights when hunger pinched at her stomach, when bills piled up, when people around her doubted her. But still, she played. She practiced in silence, tears sometimes running down her cheeks as she pressed the keys, feeling both sorrow and hope in every note. The piano did not judge. The piano did not mock. The piano answered her with sound, and that was enough. People in her life rarely understood her passion. Some laughed when she played, calling it strange, unnecessary. Friends left, lovers doubted, strangers stared. Each time, she had two choices: stop or continue. She chose to continue. Her life had taught her resilience, and her music was the proof of it. She knew that one day, all that quiet practice might mean something. She held on to that thought like a secret treasure. Even as she grew older, her circumstances did not improve much. She moved from place to place, always careful to keep the piano, even if it meant sleeping on floors or giving up comforts. She kept her music alive when other dreams had faded. It was her soul's work, her private rebellion against a world that assumed she could not achieve greatness. The memory of a particular evening came back to her vividly. She had been 11 or 12, sitting on a small wooden bench in the corner of a dimly lit room, listening to a neighbor's piano through the thin walls. She had copied every note, every pause, every dynamic shift she could hear. Her fingers mimicked the movements, even when there was no instrument beneath them. She practiced on tables, on laps, on imaginary keyboards, never letting the opportunity to learn slip away. By the time she had access to her own piano, her fingers already knew the language. In school, she had been quiet, unassuming. Teachers overlooked her, classmates underestimated her. She was never the first to raise her hand or speak in class. Yet when music was part of the day, she excelled. Notes that seemed complicated to others came naturally to her. She was disciplined, patient, willing to repeat a task 100 times to get it right. This was not for recognition or reward. This was for the feeling it gave her, the way the sound filled spaces in her heart where words could not reach. Life was demanding. She took odd jobs, worked long hours, and sometimes returned home exhausted, thinking she could not touch the piano that night. But she always did. Even if she was tired, even if she had barely eaten, she would sit at the keys, and the world outside her small apartment ceased to exist. The piano spoke, and she listened. It wasn't always a private joy. There were moments when she played for neighbors, for children on the street, for anyone willing to hear. Some left without notice. Some clapped politely, barely paying attention. A few stayed, their eyes wide with surprise, asking where she had learned to play. She rarely answered directly, only nodding and continuing. Praise was not her goal. Music itself was the reward. Despite her modest life, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. She did not seek approval, did not crave recognition. She simply practiced, prepared, and waited. Life had taught her patience. She knew that talent, when nurtured quietly, could outlast judgment and mockery. The world could laugh. But the truth of her skill was waiting, hidden, ready to reveal itself when the moment arrived. As the evening approached, at the event she had attended, she felt a familiar pull, a heartbeat that resonated deep in her chest. The memories of practice, of silent nights, of stubborn determination, all came rushing back. Her hands itched to move, to find the keys beneath them, to let music flow freely once more. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the piano in front of her, imagining the notes she had played countless times before. She remembered each night of dedication, the countless hours where no one watched, where no one applauded. Those nights had shaped her, had prepared her for this moment she didn't even know was coming. Every mistake, every skipped meal, every ignored invitation or ridicule had been a step toward this unseen stage. She had practiced for years, not knowing if anyone would ever hear, but believing, always believing, that the music mattered. Her mind drifted to the people who had mocked her in the past. At first, it stung. Their laughter, their judgment, had once felt heavy. But now, she felt a different strength. The piano had always been her truth. She realized that no mockery could touch the hours she had spent learning. No words could diminish the dedication she had poured into her fingers and soul. The room around her buzzed with excitement. People chatted about performances and talent, oblivious to the quiet storm of preparation that existed in someone's unseen life. She observed them, noting their confidence, their assumptions. No one considered that the small, quiet woman sitting at the back of the room could possess anything extraordinary. That was precisely why this moment was significant. She remembered the times she had played alone, each note carrying her emotions, each chord a reflection of her life. She thought about how music had saved her from despair, given her a voice when the world had ignored her. Each practice session had been more than learning technique. It had been an act of survival, of preserving something sacred amidst struggle. The memories were vivid, almost tactile. She could feel the worn keys beneath her fingers, smell the faint scent of polish and wood, hear the resonance of notes in the small apartment. Every detail reminded her that skill was born in silence, honed in patience, and kept alive by dedication. She understood now more than ever that talent was not always visible until it chose to reveal itself. Her heart raced with anticipation, but her exterior remained calm. She had spent her life cultivating patience, and now it was time to let the music speak. Not for the people around her, not for applause, not for recognition. For the music itself, for the truth she had carried quietly, faithfully, and tirelessly all these years. She watched the piano at the front of the room, imagining her fingers on its keys, imagining the melodies she had practiced countless times. A sense of readiness settled in her, deep and unshakable. Years of unnoticed effort had led to this moment. The world could doubt her, mock her, underestimate her, but none of it mattered. Her music was real, and she knew it, as the first notes from another performer floated across the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a sense of peace. The sounds reminded her of her journey, the nights of struggle and solitude, the dedication that had shaped her into who she was. Each note resonated not just in the room, but in her memory, in her heart, and in the life she had quietly built. She sat still and composed, hands resting in her lap. Around her, people continued their chatter, unaware of the depth that resided in the small woman in the corner. She did not need their attention, did not crave their praise. She had already proven her commitment to herself, to her passion, to the music that had carried her through life's hardships. The event continued, and anticipation grew. People moved closer to the stage, preparing to showcase their talent. She observed silently, each performance a reminder of what she had learned in solitude. Technique, confidence, expression, these were things she had developed in her own time, in her own quiet world. She had practiced for moments like this without ever knowing it. The memory of her journey strengthened her resolve. She understood the value of quiet preparation, of persistence, of faith in one's own abilities despite the opinions of others. That understanding gave her a calm energy, a readiness that was not visible on the surface, but radiated from within. She was prepared for whatever would come next, not because she had been seen, but because she had been faithful to herself, and as the evening moved on, she remained seated, eyes occasionally flicking to the piano at the front. Her mind replayed every lesson learned, every late night spent practicing, every obstacle she had overcome. She felt a quiet pride, not for recognition but for the journey itself. Every note she had ever played, every hour she had invested in her passion, had prepared her for this moment she had not yet realized would come. She did not know what the future held, did not anticipate the reactions, the laughter, or the surprise that might greet her. All she knew was the music, the piano, and the readiness that had been nurtured over years of unseen dedication. She understood that greatness often grows in silence, and when it is revealed, it cannot be ignored. In that crowded, bustling room, she felt the presence of all the nights she had spent alone, the struggles she had faced, and the quiet victories she had claimed for herself. She felt the depth of her preparation, the strength built through years of patience, the truth of her skill that was waiting to emerge. And she waited, calm, confident in the power of what she had cultivated quietly, faithfully and passionately. The moment she had been quietly waiting for was approaching, though she did not know it yet. The room buzzed with excitement, people talking about the performances to come, sharing opinions about talent, technique, and recognition. Her eyes stayed on the piano at the front of the room, imagining the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, imagining the music she had practiced so many times in silence. Then a voice called for attention. The event was about to begin, and the performers were invited one by one. Her heart skipped a beat, but she did not move. She was still seated, blending into the background, unnoticed by most, but very aware of every whisper and glance that passed her way. Some people looked at her with curiosity, some with judgment, others with barely hidden amusement. She had learned to recognize the look of doubt and mockery. It was subtle, often disguised as curiosity, but she had experienced it all her life. There were those who smiled politely, but their eyes carried questions. What is she doing here? Does she belong? The same looks she had seen in school, at work, in streets, and gatherings repeated here. The room had not changed, only the faces. She felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She had not planned to perform. She had not raised her hand or announced her intention. Yet the pull toward the piano was irresistible. Memories of years of practice, of countless nights spent alone with only her music, came flooding back. Her fingers itched to move, to press the keys, to release the emotions she had held inside for so long. As the first performers came on stage, the room filled with applause. Each performance was met with approval, praise, or polite recognition. People were confident, proud of their talent, and certain of their place. She watched quietly, her mind full of both admiration and longing. She could feel the difference between the performances and the preparation that had been done in silence. Many played with confidence, a few with the depth that comes from years of unseen struggle and passion. Then, someone noticed her. A participant leaned toward a friend, whispering loudly, pointing in her direction. A few others turned, their eyes narrowing slightly, curiosity mixed with disbelief. The words were soft, but clear. Who is she? Why is she here? Does she even play? Laughter followed, quiet at first, then gaining confidence. She heard it. She did not flinch, but she felt the familiar sting of judgment that she had carried all her life. Her pulse quickened, but she reminded herself of all the nights she had spent practicing. Every key pressed, every melody memorized, every mistake repeated until corrected. All of it had prepared her for moments like this. The world could mock her, but the piano did not care about their laughter or disbelief. The piano had always answered her faithfully. A small tremor passed through her hands. She pressed them together, grounding herself. She could feel the energy in the room, the expectation, the judgment. People were not just questioning her skill. They were questioning her right to be present. That was nothing new. She had faced this feeling countless times before, in every classroom, workplace, and public space she had entered. The difference now was that the piano was near, waiting silently, ready to reveal what words could not. She glanced around at the audience. They were confident, assured of their superiority, convinced that someone like her could not possibly possess talent. Some whispered, some laughed quietly, others shook their heads. The atmosphere thickened with doubt. It was heavy, almost suffocating. Yet she sat still, calm on the outside, heart pounding on the inside. She had learned to endure scrutiny, to remain composed while the world judged her harshly. The staff at the front of the room called another performer to the stage. Applause filled the space again. She could feel the anticipation building within the crowd, and the contrast of her quiet presence against the active performers seemed to highlight her simplicity. The whispers grew louder. People glanced her way repeatedly, curiosity and doubt mixing in their expressions. She could almost hear the questions forming silently in their minds. What is she doing here? How could someone like her play? She took a deep breath, centering herself. She focused on the memories of late nights, the repetition of scales, the melodies she had perfected in private. She remembered how music had been her refuge, her voice, her escape from a world that often ignored or dismissed her. Those nights had built more than skill. They had built strength, patience, and resolve. Her fingers twitched slightly, responding to the memory of each note. She felt the rhythm in her mind, the harmony of her practiced melodies, and a quiet confidence began to rise within her. She had been preparing for this her entire life, though she had not known it. Every challenge, every doubt, every sneer had contributed to the readiness that now simmered beneath the surface. Yet doubt lingered. She asked herself silently if she should remain in the shadows. The fear of failure, the fear of public judgment, was natural. For a moment, the old question surfaced. What if I cannot play perfectly here? What if they laugh at me? What if this moment shatters everything I have built quietly? The tension tightened in her chest. She closed her eyes briefly, exhaling slowly, recalling the countless times she had faced obstacles and chosen to continue. She had overcome fear before. She could do it again. Then, a moment of opportunity arrived without warning. The stage, previously reserved for others, had a brief pause. A staff member called for an additional participant to step forward, and in that instant she knew. It was a silent invitation, unspoken yet undeniable. Her body reacted first. She stood slowly, deliberately, moving toward the piano with calm steps, each one measured, each one carrying the weight of years of preparation. The whispers turned into murmurs. People leaned forward, some in curiosity, others in disbelief. The laughter that had been quietly shared behind hands became more obvious. She felt the energy of doubt, the skepticism pressing down from every side. Yet she did not falter. She had rehearsed this countless times in solitude, and the piano had never failed her. As she reached the instrument, she paused briefly. Her hands hovered above the keys, the familiar sensations stirring memories and emotions. She remembered the nights when music had been her only companion, and the sound of each note had filled her apartment with life, hope, and determination. Each key pressed in those quiet hours had been a promise to herself that she would one day be ready, no matter who doubted her. The room was silent in anticipation now. Some eyes were wide, some skeptical, some amused, and some curious. The contrast between her simple appearance and the grandeur of the piano at the front created a tension that was almost palpable. She felt every gaze, every whispered word, every quiet laugh. She acknowledged them, but did not allow them to shake her. A deep breath, one that carried years of preparation, passed through her. She allowed herself a moment of stillness, connecting with the piano as she had done countless times before. The keys, the sound, the rhythm, they were familiar companions, guiding her hand, reassuring her, reminding her of every triumph she had achieved in private, and then she let her fingers move. The first note rang out, soft but deliberate. The sound filled the room, breaking the tension with its clarity and precision. She continued note after note, melody flowing naturally from her years of practice. The audience, initially skeptical, paused. Some faces shifted from amusement to surprise. Some whispers fell silent. All attention began to focus on the music. She could feel the weight of the room, the expectations, the judgment, yet it no longer burdened her. She played with the skill, emotion, and depth that only years of hidden practice could create. The mocking stares softened as they were replaced by concentration and awe. The music spoke louder than words, and the truth of her talent became undeniable. Each phrase she played carried the story of her life, the nights of dedication, the silent struggles, the private victories. People who had laughed or doubted were now captivated, unable to look away. The piano, which had been a tool of private expression, became her voice, her statement, her undeniable proof that talent could not be judged by appearance. The moment stretched, each note resonating, each pause deliberate. She played not for applause, not for recognition, but for the music itself. For the first time in a long while, the world could only listen, and for the first time, they could not ignore her. She had transformed from the simple, overlooked woman in the back of the room into someone whose presence demanded attention. Not through words, but through mastery and emotion. By the time the final note lingered and faded, the room was silent. Every eye was on her, some wide with disbelief, others with admiration, a few with quiet shame. The whispers had vanished. The laughter had disappeared. For a moment, there was nothing but the resonance of the piano and the undeniable presence of a woman who had waited her entire life for this moment, the moment she began to play. The air in the room shifted. What had been a mixture of curiosity, doubt, and quiet amusement transformed into something else entirely. The first notes rang clear and precise, each one measured and deliberate. She did not rush. She did not falter. The music carried the weight of her life, the hours of practice, the struggles and silent victories that no one had ever seen. It filled the space with a presence that was undeniable. At first, some people still whispered, unsure of what they were hearing. The melody was familiar yet unfamiliar, simple yet profound. It touched a part of the heart that could not be reached by words or appearances. Slowly, the skepticism began to fade. Eyes widened, mouths opened slightly, and people leaned forward, drawn into the sound. The laughter, the mockery, the doubts, all of it, was silenced by the purity of the music. She played with emotion, letting her experiences guide her fingers across the keys. Each note told a story of quiet determination, of late nights when the world was asleep, of tears and triumphs in equal measure. The music was not just a performance, it was a revelation. People who had underestimated her began to realize that what they had seen on the surface was only a small part of who she truly was. Some listeners felt a lump rise in their throat. They were touched not by grandeur or flash, but by the sincerity and depth that poured from her playing. Each chord resonated with a truth they could not ignore. The room was full of people, yet it felt intimate, as if the music had created a private world where only honesty and feeling existed. The power of her playing lay not in skill alone, but in the life that had shaped that skill. She continued without hesitation, her eyes occasionally closing as she immersed herself in the rhythm and melody. The piano seemed to respond to her, each note a conversation between instrument and player. The melodies were fluid, moving effortlessly between soft, delicate passages and stronger, more confident chords. The contrast brought a richness to the performance, a depth that few could create. Years of solitude and practice had prepared her to speak in this way, to communicate through sound alone. Some of the audience could no longer contain their admiration. They whispered among themselves, astonished by the talent emerging from someone they had ignored. Others stared, unable to speak, as if the music had reached a part of them they had long forgotten. The atmosphere was electric, yet gentle, charged with emotion that could not be labeled or confined. She was no longer the simple, overlooked woman in the back. She was a master of her craft, and the room knew it. She allowed herself to remember the nights she had spent learning, repeating the same passages until her fingers knew them perfectly. She thought of the times she had been hungry, tired, or dismissed, and how she had chosen to continue, to practice, to persist. Those memories did not distract her. They strengthened her. Every hardship, every doubt she had faced, had built the foundation for the music that now filled the room. The audience could not see the years, but they could feel them in every note. As she played, she noticed subtle changes in the audience. Faces that had been skeptical softened, some showing surprise, others awe. Eyes that had rolled or narrowed now focused intently on her hands, following the movement across the keys. Whispers of mockery were replaced with quiet admiration, and some people shook their heads, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The woman they had underestimated was commanding the room through music alone. A few of the listeners were moved to tears. They had not expected this, not from her. The emotions were raw, unfiltered, and sincere. The performance was not about impressing anyone, not about winning applause or recognition. It was about expressing a lifetime of feelings, a journey that had been hidden in quiet determination. Each note was a testament to resilience, patience, and unyielding commitment. She played longer than she intended, caught in the flow of expression. The music seemed to have a life of its own, guiding her hands, shaping the emotions of the room. She did not rush to finish. She allowed the performance to unfold naturally, each section revealing new depth, new strength. People were captivated, drawn into the ebb and flow of her melodies. For many, it was an awakening, a reminder that true talent often hides where it is least expected. As the final passage approached, the music grew softer, more delicate. She allowed the melody to linger, each note fading gently into the next. Silence followed the last chord, a profound stillness that filled the room. No one spoke. No one moved. The echo of her music remained, lingering in the hearts of those who had listened. The impact was palpable. The moment transcended ordinary applause or recognition. It was a shared experience, a connection between performer and audience that could not be forced or fabricated. Finally, some clapped hesitantly at first, then more confidently. The applause spread, filling the room, though even that could not fully capture the depth of what had been experienced. People who had mocked or doubted her were now looking at her with respect, awe, and perhaps a hint of shame for their earlier judgments. She did not seek their approval, but it was impossible not to notice the shift in perception. She rose from the piano, calm and composed. Her face showed no arrogance, no desire for attention. She had played for the music, for the truth she carried within herself. The audience, now fully aware of her talent, could only respond to what they had witnessed. Some were speechless, others smiling with admiration, a few still processing the unexpected revelation. It was a moment of transformation, not just for her, but for everyone in the room who had underestimated her. The music had spoken louder than words ever could. It had revealed a story of perseverance, resilience, and passion. People understood, even if only intuitively, that what they had witnessed was the culmination of years of quiet effort and dedication. The simple woman they had mocked had shown them a truth they could not ignore. Talent and strength often reside in places where no one expects to find them. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt a sense of peace. The journey that had begun in obscurity and quiet nights and unseen effort had reached a moment of undeniable impact. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and judgment, and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger, capable of sharing her gift in a way that could not be dismissed. The performance was more than music. It was a declaration of resilience, a reminder that true talent cannot be judged by appearances alone. The room remained charged with the resonance of her music, a quiet acknowledgement of the power of dedication and authenticity. People spoke in hushed tones, reflecting on what they had just experienced. Some were inspired, others humbled, many awed by the depth and sincerity of the performance. The simple woman they had dismissed was no longer overlooked. She had revealed herself through a medium that transcended skepticism, mockery, and doubt. She walked slowly toward the back of the room, acknowledging the silent respect she felt from the audience. She did not bask in the attention, nor did she seek validation. Her satisfaction came from the act itself, the fulfillment of expressing her years of effort and passion. The music had spoken the truth, and that was enough. For the audience, the impact would linger. They would remember the transformation, the moment when mockery turned into admiration, when doubt turned into recognition. They had witnessed not just a performance, but a life distilled into music, a story of perseverance and unseen dedication revealed through sound. It was a powerful reminder that the quietest, simplest person might hold the deepest, most extraordinary talent. She had played flawlessly, yes, but more importantly, she had played from the heart, and the room had listened. The barriers of judgment, the assumptions of superficiality, had been broken by something authentic, something enduring. Her performance was a testament to the fact that true mastery, born from persistence and humility, could not be ignored. The simple woman had spoken through her music, and the world, for at least this moment, had no choice but to hear. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Though the echo of her performance lingered in the air like a gentle vibration, people moved, whispered, and exchanged glances, yet the atmosphere had changed. Something profound had occurred, something that went beyond applause or polite recognition. The simple woman who had once been overlooked had revealed herself in a way that no one could deny. Some approached her cautiously, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and admiration. They asked questions in hushed tones, eager to understand, to connect, to perhaps learn the secret behind such mastery. She responded simply, with gentle nods and quiet words. There was no arrogance, no desire to impress. She had shared her gift, and that was enough. Her satisfaction came from knowing she had stayed true to herself, that her music had spoken the truth she had carried for so long. As she walked through the room, people gave her looks that were different from those she had experienced before. There was respect now, a recognition that had nothing to do with wealth, clothing, or outward appearances. It was a recognition of dedication, of talent honed in silence, of resilience that refused to be broken. Some felt ashamed for having doubted her, while others were inspired, realizing that they had underestimated what could be achieved quietly. Away from the eyes of the world, she remembered all the nights she had spent alone, practicing, perfecting, and pushing herself forward. Every tear, every moment of doubt, every struggle had led to this moment of revelation. The audience could see and hear her talent, but only she knew the years of persistence, the sacrifices, and the resilience that had made it possible. In a way, the performance was a culmination of her life's journey, and it had spoken volumes without a single word spoken. People lingered near the piano, asking about the pieces she had played, her techniques, and her inspiration. She explained softly, focusing on the joy of music itself rather than the admiration it brought her. Her humility was striking. Those who had mocked her initially found themselves humbled by not only her skill, but her grace and composure. She had transformed the perception of what it meant to be talented and modest. For many, it was a lesson in human character. They realized how often they had judged by appearances, by superficial assumptions, by the shallow lens through which society often views others. This simple woman had proven that greatness does not always announce itself. Sometimes it resides quietly, waiting for a moment to reveal itself fully. Her performance was that revelation, a testament to patience, persistence, quiet courage. The memory of her journey flashed in her mind. She had once been ignored, laughed at, and doubted by people she had known and strangers alike. Yet she had never stopped believing in herself. She had never abandoned her practice, never given up on the music that had sustained her through difficult times. That unwavering commitment was now visible, undeniable, and it resonated deeply with everyone in the room. As she left the stage area and returned to a quiet corner, people continued to approach her. Some apologized for their earlier skepticism. Others shared personal stories of struggles, dreams, and hidden talents. She listened with the same patience and humility she had carried throughout her life. She did not need recognition, but she understood the impact her example could have on others. Her presence, her skill, and her journey had already inspired change. The event continued. But she no longer felt invisible. She moved through the crowd with calm assurance, acknowledging greetings and smiles without seeking attention. Her confidence was quiet, not loud or demanding. It came from a place of inner certainty, from knowing the years of dedication and the truth of her own abilities. People who had once dismissed her could not deny the transformation that had occurred. She had emerged not through force or demand, but through demonstration of talent and character. That evening, as the event came to a close, people lingered to speak to her, to understand, and to express admiration. They had witnessed more than a performance. They had witnessed a life expressed through music, a story of resilience and authenticity. The room, once filled with judgment and doubt, was now filled with appreciation and respect. Her impact had reached far beyond the piano, and the notes she played it had touched hearts, shifted perspectives, and inspired those who listened. She reflected quietly on what had happened. The experience was not about revenge, proving others wrong, or gaining fame. It was about the culmination of years of effort, the realization that quiet persistence could produce profound results. It was about showing without words that talent and dedication could not be measured by appearances or shallow judgments. She felt a quiet pride, sense of fulfillment that surpassed any applause or recognition. Walking through the city later that night, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. People might still judge, still doubt, still overlook, but she knew that she had demonstrated something enduring. Her music had spoken, her life had spoken, and the truth of her abilities was no longer hidden. For her, that was the most important acknowledgement of all. In the days that followed, her story spread quietly. People who had attended the event shared their experience with friends and family. They spoke of a simple woman who had played the piano with unmatched skill and depth, whose music conveyed emotions that words could not capture. Some listeners described being moved to tears, others to deep reflection. The story became an example of what could be achieved through quiet, perseverance, and dedication. She did not seek the attention. She returned to her routine, her work, her practice. The world might have begun to see her differently, but her focus remained the same: the music, the practice, and the life she had built quietly and faithfully. She continued to play, to perfect, to express, not for recognition, but for the joy and truth it brought to her own life. Over time, her story became more than just a tale of a remarkable performance. It became a lesson in humility, patience, and the power of persistence. People remembered how easily she had been underestimated, how she had faced mockery and doubt, and how she had responded not with anger or complaint, but with skill, grace, and quiet determination. It was a story that inspired others to believe in their own hidden talents and to pursue their passions, regardless of the world's judgment. For her, The experience reinforced the values she had carried throughout her life. It reminded her that true achievement does not require recognition or applause, but faithfulness to one's own abilities and a willingness to persevere in the face of doubt. Her music, her dedication, and her calm presence had communicated more than words ever could. She had shown that greatness can exist quietly, waiting for the moment to be revealed, as she played in the following weeks and months. People who had heard her performance came to see her again, eager to experience the depth of her talent. They approached not with mockery or doubt, but with curiosity, respect, and admiration. Some asked for guidance, inspired by her example. She welcomed them gently, sharing insights not just about music, but about resilience, focus, and the importance of dedication. She became more than a performer. She became a quiet mentor, a symbol of what persistence and patience can achieve. Her life continued in its modest way, but the impact of that one performance lingered, both for her and for those who had witnessed it. The simple woman once mocked and overlooked had become a reminder that true skill and determination cannot be measured by appearances. Respect, acknowledgement, and inspiration had been earned, not demanded, and that made them enduring and meaningful. Years later, people would still recount the story of the simple woman who played the piano perfectly. They would remember how she had transformed judgment into admiration, doubt into awe, and silence into a powerful expression of truth. Her story became a timeless reminder that persistence, humility, and authenticity could achieve what mockery and underestimation never could. She had revealed the power of quiet determination, and in doing so, she had left an impact that resonated far beyond the notes she played.